Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We broadcast 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, from 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. Jason engineers the broadcast Tuesday through Friday. Thank you, Jason. And if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line, 605-477-3249. Hour number 1 is with Dr. Margaret in Spain. Hour number 2 is I'll be talking about my book, tips that I have for you. We'll be talking about making sure your car is winterized. We'll be talking about the types of solar systems and power generation systems and the huge mistakes that Californians have made with their solar systems. Unbelievable mistakes they've made. And I will tell you how to prevent those if you decide to pursue your own power generation system. So this hour we're going to be talking about food, and we're going to be talking about food behavior. Welcome, Dr. Margaret in Spain.
Well, welcome to you, Vincent. How are we today?
I'm really well. I'm looking at what I hope is the last day of rain for 3 or 4 days. It would be really nice if this is it. Then we can let the hay dry out, the grass dry out, cut the hay, let it dry, and we'll have hay for the winter. But we have been feverishly preparing for what we believe is going to be a very rough winter. Are you hearing signs of and rumblings in Spain about it could be a rough season or not?
Not a word.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Not a word. It's like two different planets. The information doesn't flow well across the ocean. It's unusual. It concerns me. I'm happy to have access to more than one source. But here, no, the big rush is to get the vaccination shot. But nobody's talking about food, and nobody's concerned. It's, I listened to, what's the name, Mike Rivera, What Really Happened, and he's been pushing this coming food shortages issue for quite some time, and he's continued to talk about it, and, I hear what's happening in the States, and I just don't know what's going to happen. Now, let me say that I thought your talk yesterday with Rick was really good, and it tied into so many things I've been thinking about. And actually, with all the disasters going on, the fires in California right now, the Pacific Light and whatever, turning off the power, mentioning food storage lists sounds a little bit, low level. I mean, it's time to have it done. And so I'm going to ask, I answered your question. No, nobody's talking about it here. There's plenty of food. People have their own gardens. There's fruit hanging off of the trees so much that it just lays on the ground because people get tired of picking it up. The chestnuts are falling off. It's, they have their pigs and their sheep and their cheeses and bread, and nobody's worried about it. It's like, it's incredible, the difference. I just wanted to start off our talk today by just being repetitious and wanting to ask the audience just mentally, how are they doing with their food storage list, and have they had a family meeting yet? I don't know. What do you think? Do you get any feedback from anyone?
No. I've done it for years. I've asked people to do this fire drill. You know, and we talked about that, and no one's done it. So class, you heard Margaret over the weeks talking about have that family meeting. So let me tell you the number. We'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933. Repeat, 866-582-9933. So have you had that meeting? If you had, I'd love to, and Margaret would love to hear from you as well. What was it like? What did you learn? What was said, and what did you do afterwards?
Correct.
Did you make a list?
Yes.
Did you say, geez, we opened the refrigerator and we thought that there was a week's worth of food there, and there's ketchup, there's a little pickle juice at the bottom of the pickle jar. No pickles because the last person took the last pickle and put the jar back without, and so we thought we had pickles, and we had a couple ketchup packets from McDonald's, some mustard packets, and the bread is moldy, and so there's really nothing to eat. Did that happen to you? So you've got the number. Please give us a call. I'll put you on the air right away, and we'd love to hear what was your fire drill like? What was that family meeting like? And
yes,
we've got many lines open, so there's no waiting. No waiting. We'll put you right on. We'll interrupt what we're doing immediately.
It would be nice to know, because otherwise, why are we talking? But that's a question that's always there. Mm-hmm. Also, Rick mentioned yesterday, sort of in a surprised way, or anyway, to emphasize the point that having food stores were important, and he mentioned Kia Lua with the Fukushima thing, and kind of went over the fact that all the stores were gutted. Now, that doesn't surprise me at all. From Louisiana, when a hurricane's coming, the stores get gutted. I mean, that's typical. So thank God we do have broadcasts and news that tell us a few days before the hurricane is coming. But if nobody responds, but I'm used to stores being empty. Now I'm going to say this. I'm not used to stores being empty over here, but I have noticed that some items are not in stock. So you'll get to a place and everything's filled, and then you get to one thing and there's nothing there, which is not typical. So it's probably happening, but people don't talk about it. Certainly the politicians don't talk about it, and we don't have a big independent news network over here. There's, virtually nobody reporting on it. So, oh my goodness, let me say this now. When you have asked for years, and I have asked for a couple of months about this family meeting and the practice run, or as you call it, the fire drill, I keep thinking about that, and I'm thinking about what I know about psychology and how to change behavior. And in fact, Rick mentioned yesterday about the importance of changing eating habits, and he said it takes 3 months to establish those changes. So I think that maybe we ask people to do too much all of a sudden. Of course, when the disaster happens, you're not going to have time to practice. So it's going to be a shock. But I was thinking in terms of working with people and, changing behavior, some sorts of therapy. Maybe we should ask them to have a 5-minute meeting. Maybe we should ask them to turn off the electricity for 5 minutes. Because I can kind of imagine in my mind how some adolescents and people who are totally connected to their cell phones, they're going to flip out in 5 minutes. And all the excuses that they'll have for having to turn it on. So I just think we're being a little perhaps unrealistic in looking for some significant change or even practice. Now, if you're in the military, you can take people away for a week, 2 weeks, and they're forced to do it. But how many, that's not what we're able to do. So I'm just thinking, should we modify our request and just build it by small stages as long as we have the time? I don't think parents are used to doing this. I don't think the children are used to doing this. And the family relationships are not like they used to be. And so, I don't know, I'll stop there and see if you want to say something.
We have a a wonderful instructor. His name is Ron Allen. Ron Allen has Big Voice Productions. He does the voice work for USA Preparer's intro and outro inductions. So he's the guy that says, and now Vincent Finelli. Okay, so he's that guy. And he did a brilliant, absolutely brilliant commercial with young people. And it's one of the finest commercials I've ever heard in terms of getting your attention and getting the message. And it's a young person, very young person saying, a child, saying the equivalent of, I want pizza. Now. Now. And that's what it's like. Young people want it now. But in order to have it now, it has to be, you have to have it already to have it now.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and I don't think young people realize that there is preparedness and steps that are necessary in order to make things happen. Well, I was at a slightly off topic, but it ties. I was at a big box store and I was being interviewed, and I'll even mention the store, Sam's Club. Sam's Club is a warehouse, Walmart type warehouse store, huge. And it was in Springfield, Missouri. And so I was being interviewed by a gentleman who was writing a book. His name is John.
I heard that yesterday. The guy who's writing the book on
flip-flops?
preparation.
Yeah. So I looked over. Okay. So for those who haven't, there was a gal walking past us, and she was wearing flip-flops. And I thought, this is unbelievable. Flip-flops in the city. And then she walked over to where her mother was sitting, and her mother was in bedroom slippers. So that's exactly the opposite of what we're trying to talk about. Now, how would you convince someone like that, who isn't even wearing proper footwear? You know, we've seen people in pajamas in Walmart, literally. I don't know if they call them sleeping pants or whatever they are, pajamas walking around Walmart. It makes no sense. So we are not going to get the message through to everybody. It's impossible. And they're not going to survive unless luck is with them. And I don't believe in luck. I believe in opportunity meeting preparation. But, that's what I would call luck, opportunity meeting preparation. But the idea of having food and baby steps, that's what people are going to have to do. However, they don't have a lot of time for a lot of baby steps. I think they got to jump right in. And the story is really
already
simple.
happening. It's happening.
Let me give you an example. So in California, you mentioned California and these fires. So Pacific Gas and Electric shut off the electricity. Many had their electricity shut off. They call it power. They had their power shut off without warning. That means that stores that had meats and perishables had no electricity, and they didn't know for how long. So that's a huge problem for people who have freezers. Most people have a refrigerator with a freezer.
Yeah, and wasn't the thing it's supposed to be for 5 days minimum? And isn't it actually in effect right now?
Yes, it is. And schools are shut down. Now think about this. So do schools have food ready for their students? Absolutely. In the back room of the kitchen, there's a food storage area because they don't get deliveries just before breakfast, just before lunch. They have food available for a week, and they have meats. Those meats are going to spoil because there probably isn't a big generator running the freezers. We'll be right back. Dr. Margaret's with us. She's in Spain. And Steve Elkins in Florida is weighing in. Welcome, Steve.
Hey there. Morning, Vincent. Just to add to that, your observation, I've noticed this also, that people are not dressed appropriately, wearing the right shoes, or looking very leisurely, walking around in their PJs and their slippers. And I just wanted to point out that actually some schools, and I've seen this a lot, they have this lounge Fridays where they encourage kids to come in with whatever, and they actually come to school. They're standing in line at the bus stop here in their PJs and their slippers, and they go to school and stay in school the entire day in their sleepwear. And so it's rather odd. But to add on top of that, how crazy this is, because that was never a possibility when I was growing up as a kid. I mean, they would have sent you home and said, well, what's wrong with you, But this is being encouraged. It's being encouraged to come as you are, kind of feel. But I just want to mention something that came in my paper yesterday that I thought you'd be interested in. The headlines here, the article says, the LGBTQ plus month at first for local school districts. Evidently, here in Orange County, the Orange County public school system, they have a big marquee out front saying OCPS accepts everyone. And so this is the LGBTQ plus awareness month in Orange County, Florida here, and pushing this agenda of, homosexuality, making sure we get the message out there, and maybe we can get a couple others to cross over to the new side, the new team. But it is odd. People say these are changing times, these are strange times. I don't say that. I say these are very bizarre times. These are very bizarre times. These are very dark times. Morality is going into the gutter. There are no standards anymore.
Yep. Margaret, what do you think?
It just makes me think, including the Constitution. It's a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all have been talking, well, first of all, hi, Steve. Great points.
Thank you.
I'm going to switch now just to this. I hope you're both interested. People have been talking lately a lot about The Walking Dead and seeing the movie, and you gave it as an assignment, Vincent, and such. Well, I have one or two more that I think are incredibly informative and wonderful to watch. Maybe y'all have seen them. 1948, John Huston's Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Has anybody seen that?
No, I have not.
Treasure of the Sierra Madre?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a film based on a true story, and it was, written and directed by John Huston. Humphrey Bogart was in it, Walter Houston, Robert Blake. Excellent cast. It's a true story about 3 U.S. people who went to Mexico in the 1920s to dig for gold because they were down on their luck. And so these 3 strangers formed a little team. And they went way out and found a mine and started, raking in the gold. Well, the whole film is about the relationships between these 3 men and how they change dramatically. And it's all about how when someone has riches, drugs, arms, food, gold, well, then we get to see the worst side of our friends and companions when things get tough. So it's about human stinginess, greed, envy, the need to covet. It's about lust, and it's especially about the degradation of human values like friendship and companionship. And it teaches us, because it has a tragic ending, that even the best can go to the point of committing the most terrible crimes in times of need. So when you talk about The Walking Dead, it's like, gee, I'm seeing mobs of people roaming around. It's just all too much for me. I like this one with 3 people because it's very clean, it's very simple, and you can see the dramatic changes in the relationship between the 3. It's very, very nice. Let me also add another one. Have we seen Lord of the Flies?
I have seen that, yes.
Okay. Do you think that's also fairly informative about changes in human behavior?
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay.
It's,
going into a break.
It's pretty scary.
Yeah. Going into a break, we'll be right back. Class, let me give you that number again, 866-582-9933. Now, we're not begging for calls, but we are interested in those of you who have had that fire drill, that family meeting that Margaret and I talked about weeks ago. Steve Elkins is with us. Steve, you and I have been broadcasting a number of times, both on GCN and RBN, and we've been talking about preparedness. Have you had a meeting with your wife to talk about the kind of things that we discussed? What a power failure is like? What do we need to have? Have you had those meetings? And if so, what was it like?
Oh, yeah. She's very, she's coming from Utah. So Utah, they're very much preparedness as far as for food and shelter and pantry stuff. But she's very in tune and understanding of, not having electricity. And like we talked, you and I have been talking about my generator. I got 2 generators and how to power what I need to ride out a hurricane, because I do live in hurricane territory sooner or later. Even though I'm not on the coast, I will feel the effects of a power outage for maybe a week or more. You never know. So I like to be prepared, and she's very much in tune with that. We did a show on what being medically prepared. Since both of us are in the medical field, we have our first aid kits. We have our travel pack if we have to evacuate, what we need to take. And, she's excellent. She's excellent and being prepared for everything, every situation.
Steve, let me ask you a semi-personal question. And if you don't want to answer, don't.
Okay.
I'm thinking about young people and melting down. The electricity is off, as Margaret would said, for a few minutes. Can you imagine what it would be like being married to someone who would melt down, and you're saying, honey, we have to go right now. We have to get in the car right now. Is that something that you would experience with your wife, a meltdown? Because I don't think so.
No. Rational heads. One thing I have learned in my medical training is to have a cool head. A cool head, you can think through, you can solve problems, you have analytical, critical thinking skills that are in place, and they're there for a reason. Panic gets you nowhere. You make bad choices in panic. Calmness and using critical thinking skills and, formulating a plan in your head prior to a situation ever happening is something we should all be thinking about. What if this happens? What would you do? How would you react? And we should be playing out these scenarios that possibly could happen and knowing our plan of escape or whatever attack. And I'm never left going, oh, my gosh, I don't know what to do. That's never been a part of my being. And I know my wife's the same way because she started off as an ICU nurse also and has gone into a different area now. But the critical thinking is still there. Survival skills are still there. I don't panic. I rationally know this direction, point A to point B. There may be another route to get there, but there are choices, and I never stumble. And that's part of my medical training. I don't stumble. I know exactly what I want to do and how I'm going to get there.
Yeah, I can just imagine if you stumbled in the ICU. Well, he would have been alive had I not stumbled.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Margaret?
Let me ask you, Steve. Do you and your wife have a list? I mean, do you know exactly what you have in storage now?
Yes.
Could you make an accounting of it without looking?
Yes.
Okay.
100%. 100%.
How much do you? How long are you prepared to go for?
For food?
Mm-hmm.
I hate to tell everybody because I don't want people lining up my house.
Well, tell us about your neighbor.
My neighbor next door?
I'm being facetious.
Oh, okay. My neighbor next door is probably prepared for nothing. He'll be over at my house.
Huh?
And thank God he's not listening to this program. But I can go a considerable amount of time. Let's just say that.
Okay.
I can go more than you probably would think.
Okay.
Let me interrupt for just a second. Margaret and Steve?
Yes.
I know. Okay, this is going to hit the nail right on the head. And I did not say this. But I met a man, and I've known this man for years. I haven't seen him in a couple of years. But he said to me, and he had a good job. I mean, he was well respected in his village. Very well respected. And I really liked this guy. And one day we were talking about preparedness, and he said, Vincent, I might have to shoot my relatives because they're not putting anything back. End quote. Quote, I might have to shoot my relatives. They're not putting anything back. End quote. Now, what he meant by that was they're thinking maybe like Steve's neighbor, no problem. I don't have to do anything because Steve lives right next door. I'll go, or 2 houses down, or just down the block, They don't have to do anything because he has done and prepared with his wife. So they think that all they have to do is go to Steve's house. And what I'm saying is, here's a guy who loves his relatives. He doesn't hate them. He loves them. But no matter what he does, he can't get them to do the fire drill, can't get them to talk, can't get them to stop going to the movies in favor of buying a case of beans. Can't get them to do it.
Yes, I mean, we just cut to the bone there with the family relationships. That's what I was talking about with some of the other films. Everything changes. Your family member is going to kill you, you know, or you're expecting to live off your family member. But we're going to be at this point killing our loved ones. Not good. So, but it's true. And that's why I suggested particularly, well, both of them are horrible, but Treasure of the Sierra Madre. The things we hold most dear and cherish can change in a flash in a disaster. What if there are 5 people in a family drowning and only 2 can swim? Who are you going to save? Okay? So, and what about the sick? And what about the ones who can't keep up with the program? In the old days, the tribe or group was walking along, and if you couldn't keep up with the pace, you just sat down next to a tree and let yourself expire. There was no ability to help people. We don't do that. But it can't get more nasty. The things we're talking about. The future's here, and the future's here.
Last night we had a massive electrical storm, massive lightning, massive thunder. And I was sitting down, and Mrs. Finelli said, it's massive lightning, massive thunder. Are you concerned about the solar system we have? And I said, yes. And she said, are you going to power it down? And I said, well, you know how to do it, right? And she said, yeah. And I said, okay. And I just sat there. And that was one of those, let's see if the fire drill worked. So, and I showed no sense of urgency because I wanted her to jump and fix it, okay, to see because I normally do it. I'm the guy who, powers it on, powers it off, cycles it, programs it, whatever needs to be done, I'm the guy that does it. But I've gone through many times with the family. It's labeled, here's what you do. And it was her turn to demonstrate proficiency. So that's what we're talking about. Steve, I've got...
but let me ask you,
yes.
Did she jump?
Yeah. She was ready to go. Let
me add something real quick here, Vincent. That we talked about this before about the in-laws who aren't prepared, and of course they would come to you, and where in-laws become outlaws, unfortunately. But you also forgot one little factor you mentioned to me, and I didn't think about that till now. Is the drag in? It's the bringing into the equation the boyfriend, the girlfriend, the friend of a friend. Well, they're good friends. We have to bring them along too. And before long, you got a household full of people there that never prepared, and now your resources, what you have, of course, are going to dwindle down. And of course, this is not going to be a democracy. This is not going to be a dictatorship because it's your home. You should have the say of where it goes. But what happens when you get this many people is there is no dictator. Somebody's going to say, I don't like that idea, I don't like that rule, and you're going to have, basically somebody shoving you out and taking over control. So it is quite a nightmare to think about that scenario, but it is very, very possible.
And what you're talking about with the boyfriend, it doesn't stop there because so it's the boyfriend, but then the boyfriend has a sister, right, and a mother, and a father, and they may have a mother and a father. Right. So now, and it could grow exponentially. So you could start out with just a boyfriend, and pretty soon it's 100 people. Right. And the bottom line is there are very few people in the world who have 100 cans of anything. So if you take the sum of corn and beans and baked beans and soup, name somebody in your own mind that has 100 cans of that. Now, if that's the case, That would last, in this scenario of exponential growth, one meal. One meal. Or it would last 4 people, 25 meals. Or it would last 4 people like 10 days. That's 100 cans. Maybe 10 days. Steve, I've got to run. I've got David in Illinois on hold.
No problem. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much. And I look forward to broadcasting with you next week. Thanks, Steve. All right, that was Steve. David in Illinois, welcome.
How you doing?
Well, did you do the fire drill?
Yeah, I've always been around crisis situations, and the bigger the crisis, the more calmer I am. And people's noticed that and commented. But you may remember this because you were in the same area. We actually had police take down our neighborhood with armored vehicles, weapons. They closed the whole place down just for a day. But the point is nobody was even able to go outside. It was amazing to me how many of my neighbors didn't even have food for that day. They were not eating. And then after that happened, we had tornadoes by day, and then by night it was an ice storm. So people were out of power for 3 weeks, and nobody had anything, nothing. So they got hit twice in a row. Next thing you know, they're asking me to borrow my generator. No.
David, so
yeah.
When you have a lovely wife, and I've spoken with her, I've never met either one of you in person, but she seems just as sweet as could be. You've had meetings, family meetings around the dinner table, kitchen table, talking about what you need to do. Is that true or not?
Yes, nothing ever happens in this house without it being discussed between the both of us. She has to know what weapons are here, what food she has. She has to know everything. What if something happens to me? What's she going to do?
And that's what I mentioned about the solar system, because I acted like I wasn't there for Mrs. Finale to jump to attention.
Sometimes it hurts to take that step, but they have to do it. You have to do it.
Dave, thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it. Dr. Margaret's with us live in Spain, and she's ringing the alarm, telling you to get prepared. And we've been talking about this for 8 years. It's time. It's absolutely crystal clear that there's problems in Florida. I'm sorry. Yeah, there have been problems in Florida. And in California right now, the grid has been shut down for up to maybe a couple million people. Al in Florida, welcome.
Hey, Benny, how you doing?
Very well. How about you?
I'm great. Been listening to you about 5 years. Started listening to you when we were in Hawaii. My wife was in the military. We PCS back to Florida, and been listening to you ever since. But the first time I've had a chance to call. But my family are Hurricane Michael survivors. We took 3 hours of 190-mile-an-hour winds a year ago yesterday. We were without power for 2.5 weeks, and I now work for the Methodist Church, and we're still doing hurricane recovery, and we still have people without water, without electricity, and they literally live day to day by what their neighbors and churches and what little bit the government is there to do. They're not there to help you. They're worthless in so many ways, and it's so important that people heed your warning and get ready, because it could happen to you at any day. And
I was on the air when we had the tornado in Joplin, and it leveled the city of Joplin, Missouri. And I went out to Joplin. I was a Red Cross volunteer, so I had the credentials, the ID card, the lanyard around my neck that said Red Cross, and I just walked around, and I saw the police were blocking the road, so help could not get to the victims. The police were blocking the roads off, literally. We went in the back way, and I saw the devastation. We helped some people. We saw a guy from Arkansas bring one of those food trailers that sells food at carnival kind of things, and he was giving away food, and there were a bunch of women who were taking boxes of food that he was cooking up, hamburgers and drinks, and they were racing through the woods around the police to give the food to people who were starving, who were these victims. This was the day after. And they were, starving to death, but they were really hungry. And they were shell-shocked. But literally, the police wouldn't let you in. And people had signs on plywood, spray painted, that said, "Please help." Okay? But the police were preventing people from going in there. So I happened to see that. And I listened, I was on the radio at the time in a station in Springfield, and I listened to the news report, FEMA's coming, FEMA's coming, FEMA's coming. And like 10 days later, there was a guy being interviewed from FEMA and said, we're all excited, we've got mobile homes coming on the way. They're going to be here in about a week, and we're all excited. And so I want to know how many. 10 temporary trailers. Yep. 10. And that was the big help from the government. So I think that's what you were talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. What FEMA does, and unfortunately, I've learned it firsthand, especially when I went to work for the church afterwards, because the need was so great. FEMA will come in and they'll mass an area with mobile homes, with MREs, water. They try, but they really don't do a very good job. And right now, I'm sitting probably 5 miles from the airport here in Marianna, and we've got probably 100 mobile homes lined up, never been sent out to any of the victims. Mm. And it's like, what are you folks doing? Mm-hmm. And fortunately, I think they finally might have woke up a little bit, because they went to some of our fellow churches and said, hey, we've got 25, 30 RVs. We're having a hard time giving them out, believe it or not. So we have our list of survivors that we're working with that are living in homes that have been crushed by trees, living in mold. It's just terrible, terrible circumstances. And they said, okay, we'll give them to you. You do the FEMA paperwork. So finally, 8 months after the storm, we're finally giving trailers to people so that they can get out of moldy homes and get into something that's safe and secure. And we're figuring we've got 3 years worth of work before we get everybody safe and secure. And I had a call yesterday from this 75-year-old woman. She's been literally drinking rainwater because her well was damaged during the storm. And FEMA went out, looked at it. Yep, okay, we'll put you on the list. Well, I got a hold of it yesterday, and I got a well man out there today. But this woman, like I say, has literally been living off of rainwater because she lives out in the country. She loves her area, but she didn't know what to do. She had no stored water, and it's just crazy.
Al, as you were describing this, I was thinking of you saying to FEMA, tell you what, you give me those trailers, and we'll have them delivered by tomorrow afternoon. That's what I was thinking of your efforts. I really appreciate your call. Thank you so much,
yep.
Al in Florida.
All righty. Yep.
Margaret, it's always great being with you. If you're available next Friday, same time, same station, let's do it again.
That would be great. Let me just say this. Do y'all know how many trailers were brought in by FEMA after Hurricane Katrina and were never distributed? And by the time they thought about using them, they were all moldy and destroyed. You know how many thousands?
Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Just 3 of us in the studio, a couple of Colts, and me. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about tips, things that I've written down in the book that has not been published. I don't know if it'll ever be published, but I've got some thoughts. And if you've got a better way of doing things than I'm discussing, I'd love to hear from you. Okay? 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. And if you've had a fire drill, a home meeting with your family around the kitchen table, you can certainly call in and tell us what that experience is. Okay, so in California, there have been record electricity power shutoffs. Some reports say 2 million. Some say 800,000. Some say 1 million. I don't know what the number is. But I do know that the electricity has been shut off and there are fires in California. And the idea was Pacific Gas and Electric shut the electricity off because they thought that there might be more problems with downed power lines, power poles burning and falling over and starting more fires. So they shut the electricity off in many, many locations in California. Well, there was this thought by people who bought Tesla cars, electric cars, that they could be immune from some of these power problems because they had a solar system. What they did was they put panels on the roof, and they put in the inverters, and they plugged into the grid, and the idea was the solar panels during sunny days, of which there are plenty in California, would provide electricity for the homes, and any unused electricity would go right to the grid. And if the electricity failed, it'd be no problem because the solar panels were in place, the inverter was in place, everything would be good. But it didn't work like that. What happened was that there are three kinds of solar systems. I'll talk about that in a second. But the kind that most people installed was called a grid-tied system. So the way that works is you have a solar panel, you generate direct current, typically about 33 volts per panel, and you string three panels together and you get 99 volts. That electricity is then inverted to 120 or 240 volts and pushed back on the grid. And your neighbors get to use it, you get to use it, but it is entirely dependent on a signal, a clock, at 60 cycles per second. So the North American power system, the power grid, if you will, is dependent on a 60-cycle clock. So there's a frequency of 60 cycles per second. And that clock, that 60 cycles per second, is regulated so accurately that back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even to today, you could run a clock on the accuracy of that 60-cycle current. And there used to be clocks made by General Electric. They were called Telcron clocks. They had a synchronous motor, and that powered some gears, which powered the second hand, the minute hand, and the hour hand on analog clocks. Most people had those clocks in their kitchens. They were clocks on the analog clocks built into stoves. So we all used, because the 60-cycle current was that accurate. Well, that was necessary to run the solar system with the grid-tied configuration. When that 60-cycle signal disappeared, there's no power generated from the solar system. It is totally dependent on that 60-cycle clock. So what happened was people in California thought that they could, heck, we can charge our Teslas, our electric cars, from our own system if the grid goes down. And they found out that they could not. Now, why is that? I have a feeling it's because of ignorance. I have a feeling it's because they didn't realize how the system worked, which is why I keep saying you have to do it yourself. You can't rely on other people to tell you and configure and install and maintain your equipment, including cars. You have to do it yourself. So here we have probably hundreds of thousands of solar panel installations that did not work when the grid was shut down. And we probably had maybe 1,000 that did work. So here's how it goes. Here's the Solar Systems 101 in a nutshell. So the least expensive solar power system is called grid-tied. Grid-tied. So what you have is what I've been describing, a solar array and an inverter, and you pump electricity onto the grid. And there's a meter that says, here's how much you pushed onto the grid. And then when you draw back from the grid, the meter says, here's how much you used. And at the end of the month, there is a simple arithmetic calculation to tell you whether you owe or they owe. Okay? It's as simple as that. And that's the least expensive. There's no battery bank in the middle there. All right, so now that's the least expensive. Now, a little bit more expensive than that would be an off-grid system. Now, Rich Sheben and Gwyneth have off-grid systems. And what you have there is you have the solar array, you have a charge controller. What that does is it takes the direct current from the solar panels and it manages charging the battery bank. And then you have an inverter, and the inverter draws electricity from the battery bank and it powers your devices. It is totally independent from the grid. So that is a system where there's no grid involved whatsoever, off-grid. And then the most expensive type is a hybrid, and that's what we have. And it's not a lot more expensive. It's just a little bit more expensive than the off-grid system. And a hybrid system is, if we want, we can sell electricity to the utility company, or we can choose to disconnect from the utility company and be totally off-grid. So we have the best of both worlds. Now, the reason that we've done that is air conditioning is just brutal to try to figure out a way to have enough current to run air conditioning in the summer. It's really, air conditioning takes a lot of current. The rest of the year, we don't really need the grid at all. So we have a system that is one where we generate our current, and during those sunny days, we can run the entire farm on our system. And if we have, what happens is these solar panels charge the battery bank, and it's a huge battery bank. And we draw from that battery bank if there's a dip in generation versus what we are drawing from the system, that battery bank provides enough current to let us ride out these dips. Let's say some clouds get between us and the solar array. So that's what the battery bank is for. And then in the evenings, we've charged the battery bank enough so that we can run the devices cautiously, efficiently, judiciously through the evening, and we should have enough charge in the batteries to ride out the evening. And then in the morning, the sun comes out again, and we start charging the battery bank over and over and over again. That's how it works. So what happened in California was as simple as this. People didn't understand, or they opted not to have a system that would ride out the grid being down. I think they were considering, well, we've got these we've got these electric cars, and we can power them with our solar array. And they thought that this would be a great way to save money. And actually, it's not. It's really not a great way to save money, because the payback period is probably around 13 years to pay back a solar array with a grid-tied system. So we never even considered having a grid-tied system. It didn't occur to us, because for us, the reason we wanted to have our farm solar powered is because we wanted to be independent. And the only way that you can be independent is if you have an off-grid system or a hybrid system that you can select between grid-tied and off-grid. So I just want to make that clear. Now, a battery bank can cost as much as the rest of the system. So literally, you can get solar panels, and you can get your inverter, and you get all the wiring and all that, and that might cost half the cost of the system. The rest of the cost is the battery bank. So the battery bank is a big deal. And it's also important to decide what kind of batteries you want. So if you want lithium-type batteries, that's great. But they are really, really picky as to how you charge them. And you need to have a very sophisticated charging system to monitor each cell. And a lot of times you have a computer-controlled charging system that looks at each cell and then charges each cell depending on what each cell needs. Now, in our case, we have 40 cells. 40 cells, and each one looks like a battery, like a car battery, except our cells are 3 times the size of each car battery, and there are 40 of them. And in our case, each cell is 1.2 volts, and they are nickel iron. So we have 40 cells tied together in series, plus to minus, 40 of them, times 1.2 volts, and that equals 48 volts. So we have a 48-volt system. And in terms of how much can you discharge a battery or a battery bank? Well, if you have a lead-acid battery, and you can use those with a solar array. You could use car batteries if you wanted. They won't last very long. But what happens is there's what's called depth of discharge. And that means that how low can you take a battery before you damage it? Well, with lead-acid batteries, like in your car, if you take them lower than 15%, meaning you have an 85% remaining charge, if you take them lower than that, you'll permanently damage the battery. Permanently. So the idea is you don't want to use more than 15% of the charge. So you have this massive array of batteries, but you can only use 15% of it. You can use more in lithium, and you can use almost all of it in nickel iron. So nickel iron cells don't seem to get damaged by severe discharge as compared to lead acid. So you have more capacity in the same amount of space, usable capacity with nickel iron. And that's why we selected nickel iron. But now I have a feeling there's going to be a massive panic to buy nickel iron batteries from China, because I don't think there's any company in the United States that makes them. So now the Californians have figured out that they made a huge mistake because they don't have batteries. So what are they going to do? They're going to buy batteries. And they're going to upgrade their systems from grid-tied, which don't work when the power's off, to maybe a hybrid system, which makes a lot more sense, but it's a lot more expensive. So I think the rush is going to be on to buy nickel iron batteries from China. We'll be right back. So we're talking about solar systems, and I just gave a primer on how they work and what to consider. I didn't talk about the total cost, but if you decide that you want a second opinion, or if you have some questions, you can give us a call, and I'll tell you what I know. 866-582-9933. And that doesn't have to be today. It can be any time. Okay, so, but we are trying to stay on topic most days. If you want to learn how electricity works, I suggest you buy this book, and you can buy it used. It's a Black & Decker book, and it's called The Complete Guide to Home Wiring. And it's brilliantly written. And the one that I have is an older copy. The pages are falling out. I've used it for close to 20 years, I guess. And it has a switch, an electrical switch, like a wall switch, and it's painted blue and white. So if you're wondering about the one I have, that's it. Okay, so let's talk about a really neat device. If you want to know how much electricity your appliance uses, there's a really simple device that you can buy. And I've got the page from Amazon on my screen right now. The device is called Kill a Watt. 3 words. Kill space, the letter A, space Watt, W-A-T-T. The model I have is called a P3, and it is an electricity usage monitor. The current price on Jeff Bezos' site is Amazon, $20.59. And it has several buttons. It has a display, and that display will tell you the voltage of that outlet that you plug this into. So this is like the size of a little bigger than a deck of cards. And it has a display that reads volts, amps, watts, cycles per second, and it will actually meter how much electricity has been used from the start till the finish time. So you can say, start now, I want to know how many kilowatts my refrigerator has used. Because a refrigerator typically sits without using current a lot of the time. When the compressor comes on, it uses current. When you open the door and the light comes on, it uses current. When it's in defrost mode, it's using current. But the rest of the time, it's sitting using no current, unless you have a computer-controlled refrigerator. Then it's using current all the time. So if you want to know how much current a device uses, like a refrigerator or a toaster or a countertop toaster oven, a mixer, your lights, your desk lamp, so forth, this device plugs right into the wall outlet. And then on the face of it, it has a receptacle. So you plug it into the wall outlet, and then you plug, for example, your toaster into the outlet on the front of this kilowatt meter. And it will tell you the volts of that particular receptacle. Typically, it's going to be around 120 point something. It could be as low as 110. It could be as high as 130. But typically somewhere around 120. And you can actually look at how many volts your receptacle, your house wiring is providing from the utility, if you have a utility, or if you've got a generator hooked up, it'll tell you that as well. It will also tell you how many amperes, or amps, A-M-P-S, your device is drawing. If you push the watt button, it will tell you how many watts. And that's typically what we want to know. We want to know how many watts. So a hair dryer might be 1,700 watts. A toaster might be 1,500 watts. A light bulb, a compact fluorescent, might be 21. An LED might be 9. An incandescent might be 60. So if you want to know, this is the device. And for a little over $20, you can buy one. And I suggest you do that, because how much electricity is consumed by appliances? Well, I'm going to tell you. So you need to know this. I was in Sam's Club with John, who's writing the book about preparedness, and I brought him over to the generator section. And I said, there are a couple generators. Which one would you buy and why? And we talked about it. And in order to know, you need to know how much current or how many watts you are going to be using. And how much of that is electric motor powered, because electric motors run with one amount of current, but they start with 2 or 3 times more. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Just me for this hour. I'm talking about some of the tips in the book, and one of them is to buy a kilowatt measuring device. And it's a little over $20 and change. On Amazon, you can buy them used. I believe I picked one up for either $1 or $5 at a junk store. I can't believe it was there. I think it was more like $1. And nobody wanted it. I couldn't believe it. So I have 2. And I use them all the time. As a matter of fact, this broadcast is running on one of them. I've got one permanently plugged in because I have all of the computers at the farm running all electronics, okay? Television, the computers in the studio, the microphone mixer, the internet equipment, the monitors, the DVD player, the telephone system, everything. I have a landline system, but it has electronics for the speakerphones. I get multiple. It's like a 12-station kind of a telephone system, so each phone can communicate with the other phone, so it requires electricity from the wall outlet. All of that is running on an uninterruptible power system, which is powered through a kilowatt device, because I want to know how much electricity is all of this equipment using, and what happens when I shut off monitors and computers and mixers and so forth. So it tells me all that, and I suggest you consider getting one. Kill space A space watt. So how much electricity do devices use? Well, I'm going to give you 2 ways of looking at this: dollars and cents and kilowatts. So what is a kilowatt? A kilowatt is 1,000 watts for 1 hour. So it's called a kilowatt hour. So the amount of electricity is 1,000 watts. But for how long? 1 hour. And how much does that cost? Well, the national average in the United States is somewhere between 11 and 12 cents per kilowatt hour. So if you have a 100-watt light bulb, an incandescent light bulb, and you run it for 10 hours, that would equal 1,000 watts. So if you run it for an hour, 1,000 watts for an hour is a kilowatt. How much would that cost? Let's say 11 or 12 cents for 10 hours. Okay, or 1.1 or 1.2 cents per hour. So let me give you the numbers. If you want to know if a device uses a lot of electricity or a little. You look at the power cord. The heavier the power cord, the more electricity that device uses. So if you look at that little wall power supply, that little charger that you plug in for your phone, it has this little flimsy cord that comes out of the USB connector. It uses very little electricity, very little. So that's one way of judging. Does it cost a lot? No. Does a hairdryer? Yes. Does a toaster? Yes. All right, so here are the numbers. So a portable heater, like a space heater, draws about 1,500 watts. That is, 1,500 watts is 1.5 kilowatts per hour, about 17 cents an hour. If you have a baseboard heating unit, the kind where you have a thermostat on the wall, built-in baseboard, electric baseboard, they use about 250 watts per foot. So 4 feet of it would be a kilowatt per hour. If you had a 6-foot unit, that would use about 17 cents per hour. That's just 6 feet of it. So, and that's when it's on. So when the thermostat on the wall tells it to come on, or the thermostat on the unit tells it to come on, it's going to be drawing about 17 cents per hour for 6 feet. So if you have 12 feet, it would cost twice as much. Now, if you have an electric furnace, and some people have them, they have a furnace that blows air over some electric coils, that's about $1.16 an hour when it's running, $1.16. If you have a heat pump, which is more efficient, and those are rated in tons, so a 1.5-ton heat pump is going to use about 32 cents of electricity per hour. If you have a 5-ton heat pump, about $1.07 per hour. That's when it's running. So it's not going to use much electricity when it's not running, but it will use some. It will use some to power the electronics, the computer controls and so forth in the furnace. Some thermostats are electrically powered. They've got displays. Others are mechanical, and they just have little switches in them with a bimetal, we'll call it a thermostat, that turns on and off the furnace. They're Honeywell, they're round, and they have a plastic bezel, and you turn the bezel, and it moves the needle. It tells the furnace when to come on and off. Okay. An air conditioner, if you have a window unit that is 12 SEER, or 12 energy efficiency rating, and it's 8,000 BTU, so it's just a small window unit, it's going to use 8 cents an hour. 8 cents an hour when it's running. If you have a larger window unit or wall unit, like 18,000 BTUs, it's going to use about 20 cents per hour when it's running. If you have central air, a 3-ton central air conditioning system, that's 12 SEER, it's going to take about 33 cents an hour. A whole house fan is a lot less. It will cost you between 3 and 5 cents per hour to run a whole house fan. Now, that'd be one of those things that has the shutters, and it blows air into the attic and then out through the attic vents. The heat goes. A portable fan, one of those box fans, about 3 cents an hour. Ceiling fan, now they're pretty darn efficient. They're about 1 cent per hour. We have a bunch of ceiling fans in our house. Just as an aside, I don't like the lights hanging down from the ceiling fan, so none of our ceiling fans has lighting built in. They're wired for it. They could have, but we chose to not have those 3 or 4 upside down or semi-upside down bulbs burning out very quickly, and they're hard on the eyes, so we don't have that. But that ceiling fans are about 1 cent per hour, depending on whether you have it on low, medium, or high speed. Now, a hot water heater is a big deal. A hot water heater will consume somewhere around $41 to $55 a month in electricity just for your hot water heater. And the more water you use that's heated, the more electricity you use if you have an electric hot water heater. And one thing you should do, in my opinion, is flush your hot water heater out every month. And there's a drain at the bottom of your hot water heater. Sometimes you have to put a screwdriver in to turn the valve. Sometimes it's a little knob. But you hook up a garden hose to it, and you hook it up to a drain that's lower than the hot water heater. You turn it on and let it run for about a minute, and all kinds of chunks of calcium will come out. And what's happening is that calcium is building up around the elements that heat the water, and it causes that hot water heater to become less efficient. So you should flush it once a month. If you have an instantaneous type hot water heater, that would use about $1.32 an hour when it's heating water. Here's another big one. When we get into the kitchen. So if you have an oven, it's about 25 cents an hour to run your oven. If you have a surface cooktop, it's about 17 cents an hour. Between 11 and 17 cents an hour. If you have a self-cleaning oven and you want that self-cleaning feature powered up, 66 cents per cleaning. Microwave ovens are relatively inexpensive to use. Many of us are concerned about microwaves traveling through the air into our bodies and damaging us. So how much do they cost? Between, about 1 cent for 5 minutes. 1 cent for 5 minutes. If you have one of those portable electric broilers, 17 cents an hour. Coffee maker, about 1 cent per brew, which is a pretty good deal. So you should, if you're going to drink coffee, you should make your own. An electric coffee maker is a good way to go, and that's what we use. If you have a coffee maker with the warmer, that plate that warms up that pot of coffee, it's about 4 cents per hour. Dishwasher, electric dishwasher, using the normal cycle, not including the cycle or the feature that would heat the water, just the normal cycle, assuming that your water's hot enough coming out of your faucet to run the dishes, it's going to be between 11 and 24 cents per load. Let's go on to a toaster. So if you want to make 2 slices of toast, it's going to cost 1 cent to do that. A toaster oven is going to cost you about 8 cents per hour. A waffle iron, if you're going to make four waffles, it's going to be 4 cents, so a penny per waffle. But you can't just make one. You're going to be making a couple of waffles at a time. Refrigerators, now, we'll classify these as an older unit, 1996 and older. To me, that's pretty new, but according to published information, that would be considered an older design. So they would use about $16.50 per month. A freezer, now that would be a frost-free, okay? $16.50 for a 1996 and older unit. For a freezer, a manual defrost freezer, about 15 cubic feet, same size as the refrigerator I just mentioned, would be about $9.90 a month. Now, if you go to a newer unit, like an Energy Star, 14 cubic feet, which is really a small refrigerator, it's $3.80 a month. If you go to a frost-free, that's 17 cubic feet, it's going to be $3.85 per month. If you go to an Energy Star frost-free 19 cubic feet, it's $5.06. If you go to a side-by-side, it's $5, 21 cubic feet, would be $5.61. An Energy Star frost-free 24 cubic feet is $5.94 per month, and an Energy Star 25 cubic foot is $6.60 per month. So you can see that if you add it up by the month, if you have a large refrigerator and it's frost-free, it can add up to, $100 a year. Now, televisions are kind of surprising. If you have a plasma TV that's greater than 50 inches, it's about 5 cents an hour. If you have one that's less than that, it's about 4 cents an hour. If you have an LCD greater than 50 inch, it's 1 cent per hour. So LCD TVs are pretty darn economical. And if you have a smaller one, like 40 to 49 inches, it's less than 1 cent per hour. If you have an older cathode ray tube, about, 25, 27 inches, about a penny an hour. The DVRs, about $3.17 a month. A VCR is less than 1 cent per hour. DVD, less than 1 cent per hour. If you have a Nintendo, PlayStation, those would be about 2 cents an hour. Your computer is going to be about 3 cents per hour, depending on which one you have. Well, between 1 and 3 cents. A desktop computer, same thing. Laptop computer, same thing. Now, the monitor for your computer is also going to be about 1 cent per hour. If it's a 17-inch CRT or LCD. We'll continue a little bit more when we come back after these few short commercial announcements. What I'm trying to give you is a feeling for how much electricity your devices use. Because when you get your generator, you're going to need to know this. Just me for this hour and a couple of Colts. And I was looking out the window from the studio here at the farmhouse, and I can see Mrs. Finelli and our son, and they've got all the hoods up of all the vehicles outside outside the studio, and they're crawling under and on top of the tractors, looking at the cooling systems. And I just wanted to mention it's 41 degrees here right now at the farm in Missouri, and that's 9 degrees above freezing. So I suggest that you do what Mrs. Finelli and our son are doing right this moment. And if you expect that it's going to get below freezing in your neck of the woods, that you get if you don't have one, buy an antifreeze tester. And I just checked the internet. They are available at AutoZone right now for $2.99. And these have a little hose, plastic hose, and you stick that hose in, you open up your radiator cap, you stick that into the antifreeze in your cooling system, and squeeze the bulb and withdraw antifreeze into this cavity. And there's a needle or a dial that will tell you to what protection level your antifreeze is. So it'll say minus 20 or minus 10 or 15 plus 15, and it'll tell you you're only protected to that amount. And if you aren't protected at least 10 degrees below the temperature in your neck of the woods, what it's going to be at a minimum, you need to do something, because if you don't, your antifreeze will not protect your block from cracking, your engine block. And if that happens, it's goodbye engine, and it may be goodbye car, depending on how much it costs to replace the engine. So, word to the wise, you can go and get it at Walmart, the Chinese factory outlet. You can get it at any of the auto parts stores. Typically, these testers used to be about $6. It looks like they've dropped the price. I suggest if you don't have one, you get one. We have a couple of them, and we use them all the time. And it will tell you at what level of boil over protection you are good for and what level of freeze protection you're good for. And typically, I like to at least have a 50-50 mixture of full-strength antifreeze and distilled water. So half water, half antifreeze. But some antifreeze comes 50-50 pre-mixed. So make sure you know what you're buying. It's more expensive to buy it per unit of antifreeze if it's pre-mixed, because when you dilute it with water, it actually costs you more money to buy it pre-mixed 50-50 than to buy it full strength and buy a gallon of water. So just want to let you know that those are my thoughts on that, and I think you ought to jump on it like right now. Now, laundry, lighting. So you know that an incandescent 100-watt bulb will cost about 1 penny per hour. Okay, compact fluorescent bulb will use a fraction of that, and an LED will use even less than a compact fluorescent. In the laundry, you're looking at 28 cents to 44 cents per load for drying your clothes. If you wash in hot water with a warm rinse in your washing machine, it's about 69 cents a load. If you wash warm and cold rinse, 25 cents. Now, in our case, we never wash in warm water. Never. All you have to do is fill the washer with water, let it sit for an hour, and that's pretty good. And you can wash cold and rinse cold, and that's what we do. I don't think we've washed with warm water for, 40 years. Vacuum cleaners, about 8 cents an hour. Irons, if you want to iron clothes, 12 cents an hour. And when I was in 8th grade, I had a wonderful teacher, And he said that in Germany, what the women would do is if they're going to iron clothes, they'd get them ready and they'd iron them all at the same time. They didn't iron one shirt today and another shirt tomorrow and a different shirt in the afternoon and slacks. They would do it all at one time. They would put it in a batch and they would iron all the clothes because it takes energy to heat up the iron each time. So you waste energy if you don't do it in a batch. Night lights, boy, not much, 16 cents a month. Electric blankets, and you should never use one anyway, but about 6 cents a night. Why? Because if you have an electric blanket, you are subjecting yourself to 120 volt electricity, alternating current, 60 cycles, and it's probably bad for you. I wouldn't do it. If you have an aquarium, and it has a heater running the aerator, the compressor, and maybe a little heater, you're looking at between 1 and 13 cents an hour. Hair dryers, 17 cents an hour. Curling irons, 1 cent per hour. Not too bad. Whirlpool tub, 20 cents an hour. Swimming pool, and that's a big one. So a swimming pool, if you have a pump, I believe, I don't think this number's right, I believe that you're really looking at about 20 cents an hour to run the filter. 20 cents an hour for a swimming pool. And if you have a swimming pool, there are two kinds of pumps. You can get a 2-speed pump, which is what we had when we had a swimming pool back in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and it would use 1/6 the electricity on low and the full amount on high. So we always had ours run on low. The motor ran cooler, and it used 1/6 the electricity. So consider that. Those are my thoughts for today. And I think Steve Elkins and I are going to be broadcasting more about these kinds of tips next Thursday on Republic Broadcasting. But I'll be back on Monday on GCN. Thank you so much, GCN and RBN.